Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month.
Hello, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Eric Siegel, chair of the club's Personal Growth Forum and your host. We invite everyone to visit us online at commonwealthclub.org for a complete listing of all Commonwealth Club events and to register for any of our events. We're hearing a lot about how jobs are changing in this post-pandemic world. We're hearing about remote work, quiet quitting, and layoffs. But the keys to career success essentially remain the same. That's why this discussion with Sarah Holtz is so timely. An honors graduate of both Harvard Law and Yale College, she's a former Fortune 500 vice president, the author of Advice to My Younger Me, Career Lessons from 100 Successful Women, and the host of the highly rated podcast, Advice to My Younger Me. She's also received the American Bar Association's prestigious Margaret Brent Women Lawyers of Achievement Award in recognition of the impact that her work has had on helping women succeed. And now, after decades of successfully navigating corporate hierarchies and decades of work counseling hundreds of women about how to reach their vision of career success, Sarah is going to spend some time talking with us about how to achieve the satisfying careers we all seek and deserve. What are the mindsets we need to adopt to keep progressing in our careers? What are the critical actions we need to take to achieve our career dreams? And how can we enlist others in helping us to reach our career goals? These are all questions we're going to look at. So let's get started.
Great. So as Eric said, I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please, when we get to the interactive parts, participate. But just to kind of get it rolling, I would like everybody here to share with somebody who they didn't come with 3 things about themselves. And so I'm going to start off. So my 3 things are sea salt caramel ice cream is my favorite food. I am the pet parent to a Havanese dog whose name is Kirby. And I've been a member of the Commonwealth Club for a very long time. And I am so humbled to be here, to be part of this group. So find somebody you don't know and share. Oh, wait, first I'm going to have Eric do it.
Well, of course, I forgot to come up with some things ahead of time. So we'll see what I can come up with. Let's see. Well, I like railroads. Most people don't know that, so I go on train trips and stuff. And I've been working on the internet since 1974, the very beginning when we had fewer than 100, fewer than 50 computers on it in the world. And of course, I played computer games on it. I wasn't, well, whatever. And the third thing, let's see. Oh, I have this, we were talking about, home stuff. So I have this kind of vegetarian stew, which I called engineered stew, which has all the good stuff for you that's in it, none of the bad stuff, and tastes kind of boring, but there you are. So those are 3 things.
Okay. So hopefully, if either of us said anything that you find interesting, you'll follow up with us when we have our wine and cheese time together. So I think maybe we should get into
let's get started. I mean, the first thing that occurred to me was, why did you decide to write this book? How did this all start?
So I have a podcast, which is called Advice to My Younger Me. There's several people here who've actually been on it. I've been doing it for about 7 years. There's close to 150 episodes. And the wisdom that was shared on this podcast was just incredible. And people were so generous with their insights and what they wish they had known earlier in their career and all of those things. And I thought, I want to share this more broadly. And it turned out that, as I said, there was close to 150 interviews, and I realized that even at 20 minutes a segment, nobody was going to sit down and listen to all 130 plus. So I thought, oh, well, I should write a book. And then I went back and I read the transcripts of each of the interviews that I had done. And I realized that there were some threads that came through all the interviews, that there was a certain kind of consistency with the advice that people gave. And so that's really what the book is. It's just a compilation and kind of a synthesizing of what I heard in these 130 plus interviews with very successful women.
With women, right. So, and does this apply to men too? I've got to ask.
Yeah. So, well, you read the book, does it?
Well, I think so, Alex. But, I'm, an anecdote, plural of anecdote isn't data, right?
So what I've been told, first of all, my kind of mission and the focus of my work for the last 25 plus years has been helping women succeed in the workplace. And so it was kind of natural that I would write a book that was focused on helping women succeed. I think without any male bashing, men get plenty of help in how to succeed in the workplace, and women could use some extra help. I love the head nodding. So that's why I wrote the book the way I did. But I think in terms of the lessons that are in the book, I think they're pretty generic.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that men get massive amounts of help. And some of it's misdirected.
Well, we could vote on that.
Well, yeah, there are like a couple of guys in the audience, right? I'm going to get outvoted here. But there were a couple of things in the book that really struck me and that I wish I had known earlier, that nobody was telling me. I mean, I was an engineer. It was like, do the work. You do, nose to the grindstone was the general attitude. And you had a quote that I wrote down on this piece of paper here. You need to be good at your job and good at your career. And I thought that was really interesting. So why don't you talk about that?
Sure. So, I think, and again, I'm going to frame this in terms of what I've observed about women in the workplace, although I suspect it may be true as well for men, is that women are really good at doing the tasks that they've been assigned, right? Within the four corners of their job description, they excel at those kinds of things. Where I think that they fall down is that they're not as good as staying focused on their careers and what needs to be done for them to have a successful career. And I like to use this example of, which, is very real world, of women, you're about to give an important presentation and you've prepared all your slides, you've worked on them for weeks. You want somebody, one of your coworkers comes by and says, hey, would you like to go out to lunch? This was, of course, in the before time. And typically, I think most women would say, no, I want to go through one last time to make sure that there's not a typo in any of these slides. And my response to that is that's being really good at your job. But being good at your career would mean going out to lunch with your colleague because, 20 years from now, whether there was a typo in that slide or not is not going to have a major impact on your career. But it's just possible that having lunch with that person might actually be important. And so it's this notion of thinking about the long term and what you need to do to succeed over a long period of time versus, what's on your to-do list. And I think that, that's something that women really need to focus on more. Because somebody one time said, if the workplace were like high school or any kind of school that you went to, that women would rule the world because we're really good in school, right? A vast majority of valedictorians from high school now are women, far greater percentage than men, and it's like we're acculturated and we are rewarded for doing things that aren't, that somebody describes as what our job is. So I think we need to spend a little more time thinking about, so what are the things that are going to move our careers forward?
Yeah, that really struck home to me when I read that, when I thought back over my career. And a lot of men also this is, you do the job in front of you, and some hand will come down from the skies and promote you.
Right.
Some marvelous thing will miraculously happen, and it doesn't happen. And then we mutter to one another about politics. Well, it's politics, Whereas really, we should be paying attention to what goes on in our career, just not our job only. So, okay, so what do? I want to look at my career. I want to take a broader view. Where do I start? What would you recommend?
So what came through in these kind of lessons, I'm smiling because there are people here I know. So as I went through all these interviews, 130 plus, there were themes that came through. And I think the single most important theme, and the one that if we were going to end in 10 minutes, that I would want you to walk away from, is that you need to take responsibility for how your career unfolds. And I think a lot of times people sit in what I call the passenger seat, and they hope that things will unfold well, sort of the way that Eric described it. But typically, and you can think about this when you drive, sitting in the passenger seat is not a way to get yourself where you want to go, right? It's simple and it's easy, but it isn't the thing that necessarily takes you where you want to be. And so that's the first thing, is to realize that you are in the driver's seat of your career. How it unfolds is your responsibility, and that you need to actually invest time both not only in your job, but also in your career, because you are responsible for how it unfolds.
So, your manager's goals may be slightly different than yours. He wants you to do a good job.
Right. It might be a she.
In trouble already. All right.
Yes, go ahead.
Write a little piece of paper that says, okay, from now on, we replace this string, he, with he or she.
I actually have to tell a quick story.
All right.
Just to let
We're
Eric,
off, right.
Just to let Eric off the hook. So I have a son who, when he got out of college, worked at Bain Consulting. He's probably going to hate that I tell this story. But anyway,
Fine.
So one day he was telling me about his boss. And we were having this conversation. And I said, it had something to do with schools, like where they recruit from or whatever. And I said, oh, well, where did your boss go to school? And I said, where did he go to school? And he stopped and he looked at me, and there was this long pause. And he's like, in the whole world, I can't imagine any person for whom that is a less appropriate way to phrase this. He said, my boss is a woman. So.
All right.
No, I'm saying I've done it too.
and that the point is that she has her own set of priorities, and she wants to produce work for her management. And that may not be your set of priorities. And it didn't occur to me for years. I just kind of assumed that my management was going to steer me in whatever. And it turns out that may happen occasionally, but it's pretty rare.
Right.
So, to your point.
Okay. So the first one is to take responsibility for how your career unfolds. The second one is to discover and focus on what your personal strengths are, like what you do adds the most to a project you're working on or a customer you're trying to sell or whatever. And there's lots of research that shows that focusing on our strengths and leveraging them in what we do produces much greater impact and results than does trying to correct or improve our weaknesses. And, I don't know what other people's experiences have been, but when I was in the corporate world, the way that my performance reviews always went was, oh, you're really good at blah, blah, blah. Now let's talk about all the opportunities for improvement here. And, and that then was another 45 minutes of, and then it was only because somebody else was waiting in the lobby to come in next. And at the time I didn't realize it, but that was so kind of counterproductive. What really people ought to have been doing was focusing on what it was that were my strengths and how could they be employed in that role. So that's the second thing. The third thing is about taking smart risks. And so many of the guests on my podcast talked about how the most important things that were the turning points in their careers was when they took a risk. That was a risk. There was no guarantee that it was going to turn out okay. But those were the things that really propelled their careers forward. So that's a really important thing. And again, I think for women, that can be a challenge. We tend to be risk averse. Maybe everybody's risk averse, but my experience is that you see a lot of women who are risk averse.
Yeah, it's just not just taking a risk for the hell of it. It's looking at really calculating. Where will this risk get me? What's the probability of succeeding? What are my plans to do this? Not just saying, oh, I'm not going to take any risks, or woohoo, let's jump off the airplane. It's neither one of those.
And we could literally have an entire conversation about how you take risks and how you evaluate them and how you recover from when they don't work out and all of that stuff. But unfortunately, we don't have all day. So I'll move on to the next one, which I think is really important. It's about investing in relationships. And I actually did a program earlier today, and the question that my interviewer asked me was, why did you choose the word investing in relationships? And I thought, why did I choose that word? And I realized that the reason I had chosen it is because investments are things that you put energy into, you put resources into, with the hope that over the long term, they're going to actually result in an increased result, right? I mean, hopefully this may not be the perfect time to be talking about that in terms of investments, but typically that is what our assumption is about what we're doing. And so what I would say is, and this is a little bit controversial, but your relationships are probably the most important asset of your career. They're more important than your expertise, your experience, or even your credentials. Is the relationships that you've built are really the thing which propels your career forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think this is such an important arena. The next thing is to ask for help. And I would say if there was one of these things that I did poorly in my career, it was about asking for help. I now recognize that there's someone out there who can help you with virtually any challenge that you're currently facing. It's just a question of thinking about who could help you and then actually going and asking them. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you ask in a way that's going to get the best result. The next one is really a tough one, and that is to be visible. And unfortunately, the concept of being visible has gotten kind of a bad reputation. It starts with the fact that we talk about this word, which is being good at self-promotion, right? And who wants to be good at self-promotion, right? It's just a terrible sound. So I kind of reframed it to this notion about being visible. But the thing about visibility is, in all likelihood, the most important opportunities in your career are going to be discussed in a room that you're not in, right? Your boss is, you're thinking about who's going to get the promotion, who's going to get the raise, who's going to be sent to the expensive training program, who's going to be included in a high visibility project, right? Most of those decisions are being made in a room where you aren't, right? So you can't advocate for yourself. So you really need to help other people, arm other people with the information that they need so that when they're in that room and you're being discussed, they can advocate for you. And I think that if you reframe it and realize that that's what you're doing, you're educating people about what you do and how well you do it, I hope that takes some of the sting out of it for being a braggart or whatever. And that is what the reason to be visible is so that those people who are in that room when you're not there have the ammunition to actually support you in something that's going to move you forward. And then the final one is to get feedback. Because the truth is, we all need feedback to do our jobs better. We're not necessarily particularly good at ferreting out what we're doing that's fabulous and what we're doing that's not. And I think it's a common, not so much misconception, but in terms of the way that people act, that we are reluctant to seek out feedback because we just assume it's going to be negative, which is actually not true at all. But one of the things I would urge is that if you aren't getting the feedback you need, that you actually go and ask for it. Don't wait for your performance review. Ask for feedback after that meeting that didn't go so well. Like, what could I have done that would have made it go better? Or, how do I deal with this difficult customer that I'm dealing with? I just came back from a sales call and it couldn't have been worse. Why?
Oh, and that would build up that reputation of this person's really trying to help.
Yes.
We had this call, it didn't go so great, but she really came up afterwards and went, let's go, how do I make this better? So that when they're in that room and you're not there, this reputation is kind of out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, the other thing about feedback is we always imagine it's going to be a lot worse than it is, right? Okay. So let's take a break for questions. I've sort of laid out the terrain that we're going to talk about, and then we can go in some depth on a few issues. But what's on your mind? Yeah.
You mentioned taking risks. You give an example of what risks people took.
Let's repeat
So,
the question and I'll go get a mic.
Okay. So the question was, I had talked about taking risks. What kinds of risks do people take? I mean, it's all over the board, right? They change jobs. They applied for a job that they weren't 100% qualified for, at least as far as the job description went. There is actually data that says that men apply for jobs when they are, and anybody who wants to contradict me can, because I think I've got the data right, that men apply for jobs when they meet 60% of the criteria, and women only apply for jobs when they meet 100% of the criteria. Well, guess what, right? As you get 0% of the goals that you don't attempt, right? So you can see how that could be a disadvantage to women. So the risks, maybe it's moving across the country, maybe taking an international assignment. Maybe it's just speaking up at the company meeting or something like that. So risks there's little risks and then there's really big risks. I took some pretty major risks in my life. I quit a good corporate job that I had and I started a business. And the truth was that the business failed. And then I started another business, and that one failed too. And then finally, I started a business that was a success beyond my wildest dreams. And most importantly, it was a job that I loved and that I felt, was really having an impact on people. So, I mean, as I look back at it, I took a lot of risks, but I don't even think about it that way. They were just things that happened in my career that gave me some more information about what my strengths were and what the market was and all of those kinds of things. And that in the end, they seemed like, these were real business failures. These were businesses I had to shut down. Like, it didn't really make much difference in my life. At the moment, it didn't feel at all good, but ultimately, it got me to a place that was really a good place. So thanks for the question. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a question. I'm Veronica.
Hi, Veronica.
Hi. So my question is, maybe it's like an advice, probably. So what do you do in a situation, because it was mentioned that our supervisors, they have other plans, right?
Right.
They want us to do a good job.
They want to do what is going to make them look
Yeah, yeah.
be successful.
And then
Yeah,
we
makes
have the
sense.
responsibility to look for other opportunities, gain new skills, right? We are our own advocate in the professional world. So what do you do if your boss, yes, they're willing to help you, but they're bombarded with work?
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you do?
Well, and that's a very real situation. So first of all, I actually have two answers to that. When I say that you have to work on your career at the same time that you work at your job, that's not 50% of the time on your career and 50% of the time on your job. Like maybe all you're spending is 5% of your time on your career, what I would call your career. So I think, you can sort of carve that out and look at for something that that is not having an impact on the organization, that you could maybe do a C+ job on instead of your usual A job, which might free up time for you to do something that was actually moving your career forward. The second thing I think, and this is actually true about almost anything that you do in approaching your boss, is to think about how you can phrase what you're asking for in a way that shows what the benefit to them is going to be and also what the benefit to the organization is going to be. So are you going to get more clients as a result of doing this thing that you want to do? That's, let's say you want to go to a conference. That's the thing you want to do to expand your network of relationships and also to learn some new things. And explain to your boss how this sending you to this conference, which is going to take you out of the office and it's going to be 16 hours that you didn't work that week, is actually going to be of benefit to them and to the organization. So to try and phrase things in such a way that you are showing them what the benefit is, not to you, but to them. Does that make some sense? I think there was another question. Yeah.
A lot of the things you talk about in terms of like taking risks or asking to go to the conference, etc., I feel like take a lot of confidence or take initiative. And for people who don't have that, do you have any suggestions on like building that confidence or taking the step to like take
Sure.
the initiative?
Well, I think sometimes you just have to just do it. Thank you, Nike.
Hey, you grabbed the mic, didn't you?
Yeah.
There you are. You're
Yeah.
starting.
Yeah. And actually, that's another good point, which is you can start with baby steps. You don't have to go for like, I want a promotion. You could be like, oh, I'd like to be on that team and work on that project, right? And again, frame it like, I think I bring this perspective to it that nobody else does, and I think it would help the project well. The other thing that I've found, and actually it's in, some of it is in the book, is to think about the things that you have done that have given you confidence in the past. So when I asked many of the people I interviewed about that, and they were like all over the map. Some people were like, I have my power suit that I wear, right? And that's what I do. Some people said, I make sure I get a good night's sleep the night before. Somebody else said, I make sure I don't drink the night before. And these were like about, let's say you're doing an event or you're making a presentation or something like that. Some people said, in the shower, I play my power music. I mean, so it's worthwhile to think about the things that have given you confidence and then to put them as kind of in your confidence building box and pull them out on a regular basis, right? If talking to your best friend before you do something hard is something that gives you confidence, do it, right? And we all have those things. And then what you'll discover is that they expand. You find more and more things that give you confidence. And they just become part of your repertoire. And so they're really helpful to you because the truth is all of us, are afraid of doing a lot of these things. It's just a question of what is it going to take for me to feel comfortable doing it, to get me beyond that reluctance. And Eric made a really good point, which is you did ask for the microphone, and I'm sure there's people here who are feeling uncomfortable about that.
Hi. You've talked about the courage to take a risk. what do you do in an organization if you've taken on a project or stepped out in front and failed in the project, and in hindsight, you know that it was your fault? That's different when you're still in the organization. That's different from failing in your own entrepreneurial venture. What kind of advice do you give to somebody? Because I've seen many, many people who have a failure in the organization and they never recover from it.
Yeah. Well, I think first, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about failure and how you recover from your mistakes. But the first thing is that you take responsibility for it. That's the number one thing. Like when I managed a lot of people, and the one thing that drove me nuts, and I actually told them this when they first came to work for me, is that, you know, if you don't take responsibility for your mistakes, it's just it's not pretty. And so I think the first thing is to acknowledge the mistake that you made, to fix it if you can. If you can't, say what you're going to do in the future to avoid it. I one time had this is actually a story in the book, I think. And I say I think because if anybody's written a book, it went through 5 edits. I actually don't know what's in the book anymore. There was stuff that got taken out. But I had a boss, and I made what I considered to be perhaps a career killer of something I did. And I went to him, and I kind of, sheepishly said, I didn't do this thing I should have done. I was a lawyer, so, this thing that I didn't do was pretty important, or at least in the scheme of things, it seemed important. And he said to me, can you fix it? And I said, I really can't. And he said, okay, well, you have to go and apologize to the person that it has the primary effect on, and then you have to let it go. He said, you are better than that mistake. And I have taken that phrase of you are better than that mistake with me into every situation in which I have made a mistake, which is, yes, it was a mistake. It was serious. I took it seriously. I realized what I had done wrong. I apologized to the people it affected. I told them what I was going to do in the future. And then I stopped ruminating about it. And one of the things I think happens to people is that they just get in this cycle where they're replaying, I made this mistake, how stupid was I, all of those kinds of things, which really, sends you not to a good place. And I think this ability to sort of say, okay, that wasn't good, but I'm better than that, and move on is really like the critical part about making mistakes and moving on. So I love all the head nodding I'm getting.
We should get back on topic here. You had talked about...
We are on topic.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I made a mistake, and I would like to acknowledge the fact that... Whatever. So I had a note that we were going to talk a bit about the importance of investing in relationships.
Yes.
And why is that important, and how, how do we do this?
Well, this couldn't be a better audience for me to be talking about this, because there are definitely people in this audience who have been major contributors to my success. And in fact, I just want to call out Carol Fleming, who's in the back. And without Carol, I wouldn't be here. She leads the member-led forum on the board. She's responsible for them on the board of the Commonwealth Club. And when I told her I had a book coming out, Carol's had several books herself, she said, oh, maybe you should come and talk at the Commonwealth Club. I am certain that if I had written a blind inquiry, like, hey, can I come and talk at the Commonwealth Club, somebody else would be sitting here. So, I mean, that's a perfect example of that, the relationships. And my mentor, Mary Cranston, who I don't even know she knows that she is my mentor. What? Yeah, my buddy, but who has provided me with just an enormous amount of wisdom and encouragement, and told me to pick myself up and dust myself off over the years. so, I mean, this room is perfectly reflective, and I know that there are more of you here that I should shout out, but probably we'd be here all night. So, so thank you to all those people. But what I would say is that, relationships are probably the most valuable asset of your career. And I said that before when I said that, your expertise, I was a lawyer, my experience, I had jobs as lawyers, my credentials, I have good credentials, that I don't think any of those things were nearly as important to my career success as the relationships that I cultivated and nurtured. And, the people that, I just want to run through this list of things because I think sometimes we don't really appreciate how much people can help us, and we think we have to do it on our own. So the people can serve as references. They can send you referrals. One of the things I always acknowledge is that my entire successful business, not my unsuccessful businesses, was based on referrals from people who were my clients, and who I consider my friends. They can give you advice. They can share information that is not Googleable, like, if you want to get a project green-lighted, who do you have to have on board? Right? You'll never figure that out if somebody doesn't tell you. They can introduce you to people you should know. They can recommend you for promotions. They can alert you to new job opportunities. They can advocate on your behalf. They can recommend emergency childcare. They can tell you what it's like to work at a company that you're thinking about working at. They can do practice interviews for you. They can nominate you for awards. Eric mentioned that I was fortunate enough to receive the Margaret Brent Award, and that's because Mary nominated me for it. They can tell you that which activities you're involved in that are a waste of time. We all gone to join groups or gone to meetings or whatever that were a waste of time. They can recommend you for speaking opportunities, as Carol did. And my network has done everything I just listed. My network has done those things for me. And so I think that recognizing the importance of those relationships and nourishing them, and that's a really important part, is you really need to make that a priority. So I guess that's my answer to why I think investing in relationships is so important.
Hi, I'm Monet.
Hello,
and
Monet.
I was telling Lisa that when I was fresh out of college, I had a friend's dad who was at lunch with me, and he was like, "Hey, Monet, have you ever considered being in sales? Like, I think you'd be really good." I was like, "No, I didn't go to school for sales." He's like, "Well, let me just introduce you to the VP of sales of this company and just see what you think." To make a really long story short, we met. I adored her. She hired me for the job, and I was like 12 to 15 years younger than everyone by far. And it went really well. And then she became my mentor, and she actually still is my mentor, even though I no longer work with her, and she's helped me get other jobs. So it was like a friend of a friend, and then turned into a bigger relationship.
That's great. So can I ask a couple of follow-up questions on that? So what did you do to continue to build that relationship? Because that could have been a one-off, right?
Yeah. So she was my boss, so I had to, have weekly one-on-ones with her. But then whenever I actually moved abroad and could no longer work for the company due to my husband's job, and whenever I was abroad, I just stayed in touch. Like, we followed each other on social media. We would do like Zoom calls. And then anytime she was in town or in the area, we would like meet for lunch. And then eventually she started her own coaching business, and she asked me to be one of her like test projects, or like, well, not projects, but test people. And even to this day, like, we probably have like a monthly, 30-minute Zoom just to catch up. And I will say there are times when I'm like, oh, I'm too busy. Like, I don't want to meet. But every time there's so much value, and it's always worth it.
I love that story. Thank you. Eric, would you reward her with
Oh,
Thank you.
Anybody else? As I said, all good things come to those.
Hi. So for me, I share that my friend Kathy, I met her 15 years ago when we worked at the same foundation. we've been friends since then, and the way she supported me through the years has been through helping me with reviewing my resume, my cover letters, providing me with career advice, and the most important thing, sharing her friendship. Is one of my best friends. I just saw her at the gym, and I was just sharing with her that I want to start a social entrepreneurship business. So we're gonna make some time to meet and get some tips from her.
Some brainstorming.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Whoa.
Great.
Another book.
It's not because I have too many of them. It's because I want people to feel rewarded. Okay, next question. Oh, you have
Oh,
actually one from, well, I guess we're not on
Yeah.
questions yet.
Well, we'll do that when we get to
Yeah,
questions.
okay. It's very complicated to be up here.
Billy-
That's all I can tell you.
Right, I'm looking at this. We also were going to talk a bit about asking for help.
Sure.
And
So
eventually
I
we're
think
gonna
I
do
said to you that
Sure, we'll get to it.
as I look back on my career, the thing that of those, not that I did everything perfectly of the 8 things we talked about, but the one I failed at was about asking for help. And so I want to give you some tools because I think that asking for help is one of the things that can really leverage your moving forward in your career. So when I think about asking for help, I think about it as 2 parts. One of them is what I call the inside job, and one of them is what I call the outside job. And the inside job is giving yourself permission to actually ask for help. And I think sometimes women don't ask for help for a number of reasons. One of them is they think it's going to be a big imposition on somebody. And oftentimes, the things which are incredibly valuable to you are actually not that hard for other people to do. So, for example, certain introductions are like very valuable to you. And you say to somebody, would you introduce me to so-and-so? And they're like, sure. As far as they're concerned, it's a big nothing. And you can actually make it easier for them to do it by actually drafting the email and whatever so that all they have to do is hit send. But again, like to you, it may be, career altering. And to them, it's just somebody who's in their network of relationships that they're happy to reach out for because they like you and they like them and might actually work out well for the other person. So the second reason is, and again, I'm since I've never been a non-woman, I don't know if it also affects non-women, but it's women are afraid that it's a sign of weakness or incompetence, right? Like that I have to ask you for help on this means that I'm not capable enough. And one of the guests on my show, well, first of all, I have a very good friend, and she says, when you talk about, is it okay to ask for help? She said, remember that life is not a closed book exam. And I think that that's such a great point, which is like, you're not supposed to already know how to do it well, right? And another one of my guests said something, I thought that this was so powerful. No one has accomplished anything of significance by themselves. So don't think that you have to. Go get help. And I just think that, that's such a kind of empowering statement. And so I think those are the 2 things that you need to recognize is one, that it's not necessarily an imposition. And secondly, that, it's not a display of weakness or incompetence or lack of resources or whatever it might be. That it is actually, again, going back to that thing about demonstrating that you're really invested in your career, asking for help can actually signal to that person, like, I'm really interested in moving forward, and I can't do it without some help from other
Yeah, I
people.
want to make a point. If you look at people's careers and you hear about Thomas Edison or Ford or these guys, they didn't do it by themselves. Usually you need, the innovator, the guy who does stuff. You need someone who keeps the books, who's a different person. And you need someone who sells things, who's a different person. You almost never see all 3 in one person. And which is just an example of, needing other people, working with other people, cultivating relationships with other people who can help you in different areas. And it's easy for them. You know, just because it's difficult for you, they may love doing it and they may be really good at it. So ask.
So then I said, so that's the inside job, like empowering yourself to say it's okay to ask for help. Then there's the what I call the outside job, which is like, how do you make the ask so that you're most likely to get the response that you want? And I have a few tips on that. The first thing is, whatever you're asking for should be, I call it non-Googleable, meaning that when the person receives the ask, they realize like you've selected them because they have some special expertise that's not kind of available in the world at large, right? And so they feel flattered by the fact that you've acknowledged that and feel more likely like they're not going to feel like you didn't do your homework. Why are you coming to me to ask me for this? You could check it out in, on the internet. The second thing is that you want to make your ask as specific as possible. And the reason for this is the more specific your ask is, the more likely the person is going to be able to respond to it. And so one of the people on the podcast said that she thinks every good ask includes the word one. So do you know one person who's a product manager in a tech firm that I could talk to about what that role is? You're not asking that person to spend hours going through their LinkedIn or whatever. You're asking for one thing. Or do you have one tip for me about how to deal with this difficult boss that I have? Let me tell you a little bit about the background of the person. What's one thing that I could do that might improve this relationship? And again, this kind of limits the ask to something that's very doable and that people are likely to want to respond to. And then the final thing is make it as easy as possible for them. And so I gave that example about draft. If you want to be introduced to somebody, draft the email and say, feel free to revise it, but maybe this will help you kind of make it easy. And I can tell you from experience that, when I get things like that, people say, would you introduce me to somebody, or can you, nominate me for something, or give me a reference for something. If somebody gives me the information, I'll just hit send. I mean, I'm happy to do that. If you tell me, could you write a reference for me? And I'm like, I can't even remember when I worked with you. What did we do? So that's much, I think that's really important. It's to make it as easy as possible for the person to respond. And then the final one, and I'm going to tell a little story about this, is make it appropriate to your relationship. There's some people who are very good friends and you can ask them for the world. And there's some people who you met at the Commonwealth Club, at the Wine and Cheese after this, and this is the first time you've had them. Well, those people are on a spectrum of what's an appropriate ask for them. And I one time had somebody call me up, and they didn't call me up. They actually sent me an email through LinkedIn, and they said, could I have an hour of your time to talk about your business? Well, I didn't know this person at all, and an hour of my time, that's a lot of time, right? So I wrote back and said, I'd be happy if you could tell me what you want to talk about. I'd be happy to respond to a question. So the person wrote back and said, I'm starting a business which is competitive with your business. Remember, you know where this is going, right?
Oh, boy.
I'm starting a business which is competitive with your business, and I'd like to pick your brain, right? I'm like, well, that is a little more specific than the first one, but I don't know you, and why am I going to share with you, all the learning from my business so that you're more effective in competing against me? And so that's an ask, needless to say, by the laughter. You realize that was inappropriate for what our relationship was. Now, if somebody I knew very well, if Michelle called me up and asked me that, I would spend hours with her, sharing with her what I had learned and what I thought was what she should do and all of those things. But that's because we have a very different relationship. Michelle has been an incredible supporter of my work for many years. And, I would love to help her. So that's one of the other things is, and that isn't to say that you can't ask people that you don't have a very good relationship with or an extensive relationship with for a favor. It's just that the favor needs to be appropriate to that relationship. So it might be, if I don't know you at all, I might say, I really loved your book. What's another book that you think would really help me in my career, right? Like that would be a completely appropriate ask for anybody in this audience 10 minutes from now. So those are my
Yeah, I'd like to go for a final round of questions.
Sure.
And, those of you who are online, remember that you can write your questions in the chat at any time. And those in the club, remember we've got, wine and cheese afterwards, so we can have a big discussion. But I do have
And
an
are
online
you sorry
question.
you're not here?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Show up. Get out of the house. Good for you. So I do have an interesting question here. Do you have any advice or tips for women whose career was hindered by having babies or young children?
Boy, I actually have some pretty controversial views on this. So this isn't going to help this person particularly. I will get to that. But I think that if there is any way that you can stay in the workforce in some form, even when you have small children, that's the thing to do. The data is very strong that women who leave the workforce for a prolonged period of time never catch up. They don't catch up. And again, we could have a discussion about what a long period of time is. But people who leave a year, not such a big deal. People who leave 10 years, very hard to get back into the workforce. And at a comparable level, on a comparable career trajectory, whatever. So I think this actually is something I feel very strongly about. I'm afraid that women leave the workforce. Let me tell you that there were many days, at the time, had two small children. There were many days that it was all I could do to not walk into my boss's office and just say, I've had it, right? Sayonara. But fortunately, I didn't do it. And so I completely empathize with people who are like, it's just too hard to raise kids and be in a demanding job. But I'm really glad I didn't do it because I actually didn't understand what the consequences were. And I think a lot of women leave the workforce not really understanding the financial implications, the career trajectory implications, the personal implications, like what's my identity going to be, the loss of skills, all of these things. I mean, I could go on and on. And it's only when they try and get back into the workforce after having been out for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that they realize that they didn't really think it through. And so, I would like to really encourage people to understand what the consequences are of leaving, and if at all possible, to figure out some way to keep your toe in. And that might be, working part-time or becoming a consultant or volunteering in a role that really has to do with what your business skills are, like being the treasurer of an organization if you're in finance or something like that. So I think that that's probably, I feel quite strongly about this because I think people really don't weigh the consequences as much as they could and should.
Yeah. But if you're out, then it's a relationship problem, I suspect. Is there
Well,
somebody
it's a
who-
relationships problem, and it's also a problem of not keeping up with, one, your network of relationships, because that's how you're going to get back in. The statistic is that 70% of all people who are looking for a new job get a job through a person that they know. And interestingly, and this is what's really important, interestingly, it is not a person that they know well. It's not their best friend.
Oh.
And the reason why that's so important is once I say this, it's going to become obvious to you, which is your best friend tends to operate in the same circles you do. I was a lawyer. All my friends were lawyers. They were lawyers at the same level, all of those kinds of things, right? In order for me to find a new opportunity, I had to expand my circle. And the people who expand your circle are the people who are not in your innermost circle. So basically, the people who are most likely to help you find a job or alert you to a job opportunity are people who have a whole nother network themselves that is different than yours, because that's where the information is coming from. So, so I would say, one, you need to stay in touch with people and not 10 years later call up somebody whose office was next door to yours and say, hey, remember me? I'm looking for a job now. I'd like to come back into the workforce. The second thing I would say is that you need to keep up your skills. And some arenas are worse than others. I mean, I think in tech, tell me if that's true. I mean, 2 years out of tech is a long time, right? I'm actually asking somebody in the audience who I know is in tech. In the law, not so much, but because the law doesn't change that much that quickly. But again, now people have different ways of doing billing, and they have different ways of using technology and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's really important, if you are going to be out of the workforce, to figure out some way to both stay connected to your network and also to stay current on your skills. There's a bunch of people in this audience who probably have even better answers than I do. Anybody want to jump in? Ida?
We had a question over here.
Yeah, okay.
So we went rogue and we're talking about this when we were supposed to be talking about relationships, because all three of us are new moms.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And they say thank you also. I was wondering
I actually
if
know what Olivia looks like.
Oh, yeah. She's the cutest one. Don't tell our kids. But, so can you talk a little bit about the cycles of career growth?
Sure.
I think all three of us, we're all three working, but we're surviving, I think.
Right.
And I know all of us are feeling like we want to grow and want to continue to find what lights us up and what we can really bring to our various fields, but also just sort of like, okay, can I just be in maintenance mode for a while
Right.
and then like reboot? And what does rebooting look like? So just hearing a little bit from the women you spoke with and from your own experience about like having faith in that cycle process if you do keep your toe in.
So I think it's a great question. You get a book for it as a result. Emily doesn't get a book because she already has one.
That'll have to be our last one.
But this is our last
Yeah,
question?
Yeah.
We'll still be able to talk out there. So it's a great point, and one of the women in who I interviewed talked about the fact that when you're sitting where you are, you think this is what life is going to be like forever. And in point of fact, you've heard the saying, the days are long, but the years are short, right? That you won't be in a place where this little person is requiring the kind of intense care that you're doing right now. And so you can have, peaks and valleys to your career. And so that's one thing I would say. The other thing, again, I think that staying, keeping your skills up and keeping your network up are important. And the final thing I'm going to say is that I think you have more limited time than I do to invest in my career. You need to be super smart about how you're spending your time. So, like I would say, investing in relationships is really important. And staying visible, because, if you're leaving the office at 5 o'clock, you're not as visible as the person who's there at 8 o'clock, right? That you have to be very strategic about how it is that you're spending the time that you're investing in your career as opposed to your job is being spent. And that's not easy, but I think that kind of says how do you that's another form of keeping your toe in, is just being really smart about when you're spending time on these things that they're paying off. So I hear we don't have any more questions, huh?
Well, we're running out of time. That's our
Okay.
problem.
Well, yes.
We have run out of time.
Okay.
So our gratitude to Sarah Holtz for being with us today. We're also grateful to our audience here, as well as those listening to the recording. And now this meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, commemorating its 119th year of enlightened discussion, is adjourned.
Thank you.